Hi, my name's Lily. I hope you're enjoying our talk so far. So, I'm here today because my father, who is terrified of public speaking, yet faces the challenge almost every day of his life, has always told me to never turn down an opportunity for public speaking. So this is for my dad. My mom once told me that regrets are the stupidest thing ever. There's absolutely no point in having regrets. Because I think my mom is one of the smartest people I know, I've always kept that in the back of my mind. It's true, there's no use in regrets. So, I declared to myself, no matter how bad certain elements of my past may be, they happened, and I can't change that. And many of them benefited me at that time and place and have ultimately brought me to where I am now, which may be a time I regret upon in the future. But as of right now, I'm doing the best I can in this moment, and that's enough to ask of myself. Now that I'm free of regret, I'm going to walk you through my experience with art so far, keeping in mind that everything I've done has brought me here. So, it begins with what I call my Spark Notes revelation. It started during March break of 10th grade when I was reading The Virgin Suicides and was about halfway through and pretty disappointed. Why was there so much hype about this book that I thought was totally plotless? It's important to note that this was the first book I had ever read that didn't feature a boy and a girl holding hands on a dock underneath the sunset on the front cover. So in my great disappointment, I went on Spark Notes to read about what happens in the end and not feel like I entirely failed myself for not giving the book a chance. And I came upon these entries: character analysis, theme symbols and motifs, important quotations explained, and key facts. And I had no idea that books had themes and symbols. And it said, the horror of the mundane, the American obsession with happiness, the superficiality of vision, the ravages of time and the impermanence of memory. So you mean to tell me that a fish fly infestation is a symbol for the foreshadowed death of a 13-year-old girl and the dark blanket it spread across her town, along with the lack of control the teenage boys felt towards the Lisbon sisters' mortality, and a timeline for the sisters' suicides? This was the first time I took a dip below the surface level. I finally started to understand that a sculpture of 7 skulls sitting on a shelf was much more than a sculpture of 7 skulls sitting on a shelf. Upon my return from March break, my biggest influences were Cher Horowitz and teenage feminism magazines. Every day I wore my pink baseball hat, and my driving force was trying not to fail grade 10 art. I wanted to do a photo series because I was realizing that my lack of a consistent drawing style was causing me too much frustration to possibly be productive. I wanted to take the themes I learned about in The Virgin Suicides and turn them into my own art, but I couldn't get over the hump. The hump, for those of you who have not yet experienced it, or use a different term, is the hump that stands between you and all of your progressive ideas and you actually carrying out all of your progressive ideas. So I wanted to create images that contrasted the physical science of being and what is real, and things that are not made of matter, things that exist but not physically. For me, that was the inevitability of growing up, what happens to your body as a teenage girl, the changes you go through, and how that is affecting your life. Meanwhile, you have the influences of religion, something of no physicality, but that can greatly affect your life as well. Somewhere in between real and not real is virtual, the new use of social media and technology. And so these are the images that I created once I plowed through my first hump. Humps never end after the first. You will encounter many humps. My best advice for getting over or under or going straight through that hump is literally just doing it. Plan it, know exactly what you want, but remember to stay open to new artistic visions that may appear spontaneously. Don't marry an idea, but don't abandon it for fear of over-attachment. Accept that you will encounter haters, and that's okay, because at least you're doing something. You're giving yourself something to work off of and move forwards from. Remember, no regrets. After completing my photo series, I felt so much satisfaction. But being myself, that satisfaction was brief and was quickly followed by self-doubt and myself getting bored and tired of my old inspirations, thinking they were lame and wanting to move on to new and cooler things. Anyone who has organized or tried to organize a photo shoot before can tell you that it's a lot of work. I was dreading the idea of trying to organize such a large group of people again, so I wanted to experiment with a new medium, being embroidery. I had 2 weeks before my culminating was due and no prior experience with embroidery, but it didn't look very hard. So I spent a day or 2 gathering my inspirations, which was a huge list of things I thought would look great embroidered out, but that also held relevance to me. I was right, embroidery was easy to do, but the sleepless nights and the caffeine dependence and the delayed gratification was enough to make me crazy. I finished my piece 4 hours before the end of the year art show and sold it 6 hours later. As thrilling and gratifying as this experience was, I do not recommend it for the sake of your mental stability. This piece to me was the beginning of formation of new ideas, a compilation of things I was interested in and that appealed to me as relevant. I touched on topics of gender equality, vanity, respect and dependence, rich and retired Ontario citizens who go to Florida for March break, the influences of media, what is perceived as socially acceptable, my concern for our environment, pro-choice, things that are glorified and things that are neglected, and glorifying those things that are neglected. I was so happy to get all my ideas out on one sheet of fabric, and I knew then that that's what it was all about. It felt so amazing to make that connection between things I'm interested in and something I'm passionate about. Now, over the summer, my friend Charlotte and I traveled to France to be a part of an international peace camp, where we lived with 40 kids from all around the world and discussed primarily topics about conflict and resolution, sustainable development, diversity, and equality. I learned and I changed so much during my trip that I didn't want to go back to school and make art about my deepest and darkest concerns and my horror at the changing state of our world. I didn't want to enter that dark realm of myself that I thought I had to get in touch with in order to make good, thought-provoking art. But I knew Mr. Very would not be interested in drawings of multicultural characters holding hands around peace signs. And that wasn't what I wanted to do either. My first series back at school was A Boy's Crying. Based on my broad knowledge of rom-com movies, I noticed how men are almost never portrayed as emotional. They are seen as these terrible monsters who carelessly tear women's hearts to pieces and leave them crying all by themselves. But then I think of the men in my life, such as my dad and my grandfathers, and I think of all the love they have for their wives, and I know how they would never be as brutally cold-hearted as the rom-com characters would suggest. Following this realization, you could call it, I was writing a media review on an article that was talking about how most things deemed gender neutral were just traditional male items being broadcasted to both genders because it is more socially acceptable for a female to do something that's stereotypically linked to masculinity than vice versa. This is thought because throughout history there's been a higher value on stereotypical male roles rather than female. So in my series, I put that huge stereotype of emotional wreckage that they give to women on the faces of teenage boys. Now, I love grocery shopping, and I love grocery lists. Two things about myself that reveal my habits to impulse buy and my tendency to organize everything through lists. I love writing lists, and I thought everyone did, but it turns out that my mother hates writing lists. And as soon as I found out that my mom hates writing lists, I found out that a lot of other people actually really don't like writing lists either, and that I sort of fit under a certain category of people who love writing and organizing everything through lists. So I dug through all my old notebooks and scanned every single list I could find that had been written in the past 3 years and compiled them all together in a 110-page book. The thought behind this book is definitely an element of honesty and vulnerability, along with natural human tendencies and the need for structure. My favorite artist has and probably will always be Tracey Emin, a woman who has definitely exposed her most emotional, honest, and vulnerable side and has won over my heart because of it. It's important to have artistic influences because it's one of those really cool experiences where you're learning so much new information about something you actually really care about. My most recent series was inspired by a conversation we had in photography about the new Snapchat culture and the difference in the value of photos of yourself. Before everyone was their own photographer, it used to be a very special thing to get a photo of yourself taken, or even more special to have your portrait painted. Recently, while I was at the AGO, I spent a while in the Renaissance section, really observing what they deemed important enough to dedicate their lives to painting. In my latest series, I tried to tie that Renaissance look of high value and importance with a more modern form of media, being photography, to draw light to the new culture of self-portraiture and imagery. Now that we've reached right now, I would like to tell you that I've got it all together and that everything's figured out. But I am as I describe myself, and the truth is that I'm still sitting on a lot of humps and that I don't know what the future has to offer me, but by now I can acknowledge that it's not going to be much if I don't keep making and progressing. Through everything I've shared, I want you to take away this. And also, feel free to take a picture because this is for you guys. So, inspiration comes from everywhere, even the places in which you least expected it. You don't have to get in touch with your dark side. Conceptuality will find you once you find and understand what is important to you. Never stop creating. Plow through the humps. Don't regret. Thank you.